Hello, and welcome to Ending Physician Overwhelm. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Mello. I'm a family and obesity medicine physician, as well as a certified life coach for physicians. In this podcast, we talk about how the learned habits of people-pleasing, perfectionism, and a lack of boundaries show up in our lives and how they contribute to burnout, exhaustion, and overwhelm. The healthcare system is broken, my friends, but let's not wait for it to be fixed in order to feel better. Hello, my friends, and welcome to a re-recording of this episode. I recorded this originally a couple of days ago. It was all ready to go, I thought, but then, of course, I checked and there was no audio. It was just me talking with no sound. So this is take two. That's what happens sometimes in this world, but here we are. Today, what I really want to focus on is an idea related to a principle that I teach without always having called it this, which is really about finding your alignment. And before we dive into this, I think it's really important that we lay down a few baseline assumptions before we have this conversation. So, one, I'm going to assume that you are a hardworking person who has too much to do on their plate, because I have yet to meet a working physician who does not fall into that camp, and it doesn't really matter what else is going on in their lives. There is more work to do and be done than time and energy to do it. So that's assumption number one. Assumption number two, I am going to assume that you love something about medicine. Something brought you into this challenging field. Now, it might have been a love of physiology. It might have been a desire to help people, to be that caregiver who ties together. You might be someone who really loves to teach. And I know that if you are here listening to me, there is something that has called you into this profession, and you may feel right now that that is really being challenged by what's in front of you, what's on your plate. So I'm going to assume that at baseline, there is something that calls to you, and that feels like maybe that's been flattened by the state of healthcare at this place and time. So those are some initial assumptions that I'm going to make as we dive into this topic deeper. And I really want to anchor around those things, because sometimes we might be listening to a conversation about this and feeling like, why on earth are you talking about this? I want to know about burnout. I want to know how to feel better now. And me talking about this principle of alignment feels just too far out of field. Now, this would have been me at many, many points in my life. And this is not an immediate fix. This is a big picture idea, but it's still really important because it really centers us in this conversation so that we stay focused on what really matters to us, because that's what it comes down to. Now, I wanted to come up with a definition of alignment that seemed like it would make sense. And so this is the definition that I landed on that I liked. Alignment is a state of living and making decisions in a way that consistently honors your core values, leverages your unique gifts, and energizes you through your passions and interests. Let me read that one more time. Alignment is a state of living and making decisions in a way that consistently honors your core values, leverages your unique gifts, and energizes you through your passions and interests. There's a lot in there, but what we pull out, right, it honors our gifts and talents. It honors our passions and interests. It, honors our core values, right? All of those components together, and thinking about how can we, keep all of those things in mind as we are making decisions for ourselves and living in that place. The analogy that was paired with this is, a car whose tires are in or out of alignment. When the tires are in alignment, the pathway is smooth, right? The car is moving evenly, smoothly, efficiently forward. When the tires are out of alignment, there might be shimmying. There might be, more pressure exerted to keep the course straight because the tires want to take us one way, but we want to go in a different direction. So it's a good analogy to think about, oh yeah, when everything is moving along, it's not to say that there's no bumps or friction, right? But the course is so much more effective rather than when things are out of alignment. It's really easy to notice when things are out of alignment and to know that something is off and wrong. We may not know exactly what that is, but again, if we look at the big picture, if we look at those different areas, what are our core values? What are our gifts and talents? What are our passions and interests? We can come back to this place where we can identify what here in my life right now are those things. And they may be different than they were in the past. Where I am currently in my medical career, where I'm taking care of patients with obesity and metabolic disease, as well as a lot of menopause care, really aligns with my passions and interests right now. However, that is different. There was a time 10 plus years ago where I was really more engaged with, pregnancy and prenatal care and that early sort of journey. It's not to say that I don't like those things. I'm less involved with them. And my passions and interests have shifted over time. Thankfully, as a family medicine physician, I get to decide if I want to shift my focus. And I've been able to make decisions that allow me to cater my practice towards those passions and interests. So, see that as a series of things. One, passions and interests can change. I'm still using my gifts and talents, but I'm using them in a different direction. And made decisions that helped me to be able to pursue those passions and interests and be able to provide care in the way that I wanted to. That is a good sort of big picture look at what we're talking about today. Those things didn't happen immediately. Those things unfolded over the course of years. And it took me realizing how far out of alignment I was and deciding I needed to do things differently in order to get to this place here. Now, another assumption, right, is that it is not perfect. It is not perfect because it never will be. There will always be things in our day to day, and that might be things at home and things at work that, are not a good use of our gifts and talents, that do not honor our passions and interests, right? Some things that are boring. I wouldn't say, that it's okay to be going against your core values. Not a big fan of that. But yeah, there are going to be some things that are boring and sort of necessary because I think that's just part of adulting and that's part of probably any profession. But when we are making sure that we are aligning ourselves towards our gifts and talents, towards, our passions and interests, things feel so much better and they move so much more smoothly, right? We're still burning gas. If we go back to the car analogy, we're still going to hit some bumps. We're still slowly wearing down our tires, right? We're going to need to attend and maintain those systems, but the overall journey is much more smooth. And that's what I want for you. So I want to look at 3 ideas that are centered around alignment. Alignment is an antidote to burnout. Again, this is a big picture concept, and it's a little deeper than that simple sentence. But when you are doing things that light you up, that you are very engaged in, that really call to you, and that you have some skill and expertise in doing, and of course that develops over time, you are significantly less likely to experience burnout, right? Not to say that you won't have tough days, but you won't feel like you're stuck in this total slog of events because you have claimed some ownership. You have expressed your gifts and talents and passions and interests in such a way that you are moving efficiently through the world. Now, I've talked about this before, the Pareto principle, that 80% of your results come from 20% of your activities. This has been used in pretty much all different industries at some point, but including in our work. And I absolutely have seen some literature that suggested that when physicians are able to spend at least 20%, 1/5 of their time doing things that really fall into that bucket of using your gifts and talents, using your passions and interests, right? That is protective against burnout. Again, it's not to say that you won't have difficult experiences, right? But you won't be stuck in burnout when you are getting at least that amount of time doing things that really call to you. Now, in some ways, that sounds like it's too little. 20%, 1/5 of your time. It sounds like it's too little to make a difference, but it is also a clearly measurable difference, right? So it's a good place to start. And we could debate all we wanted about, well, why can't I spend 100% of my time? Why can't I spend 80% of my time? It doesn't really matter. I want you to know that there is some data out there that suggests that it doesn't take us doing exactly what we want to do 80 or 100% of the time in order to feel well aligned. When you look at physicians who are out there, who are leaders in their field, who are out there speaking, and you can see the passion in them. Best recent example, Dr. Rachel Rubin, who is a friend of mine. She's a sexual medicine specialist. She's a board certified sexual and urology medicine physician and surgeon. She was recently on Peter Attia's The Drive podcast and gave the best 2 hour and 15-ish minute lecture on menopause and women's sexual health. It is a phenomenal podcast episode, and I highly recommend that you go listen to it. But Rachel is someone who knows very clearly what she is called to do, what she is interested in, and it's just such a great example of she has worked incredibly hard to be where she is. And she has done so because she knows that she has gifts and talents to share with the world. And she is so passionate about these topics that she has put in the work to get out there. Now, this is not a call for all of us to be social media darlings or, to make our big name for ourselves. But I just want to show that as an example of someone who is clearly in their zone of excellence, clearly out there, working hard, really nailing down her message. And that's what I want for people. I want people to know what calls to them, to know what lights them up. And that's going to be different for all of us. But to know that when you are really in that zone where you're spending a detectable amount of time in your zone of genius, that you can do amazing things and you will feel better. So alignment as an antidote to burnout. Now, we don't jump from burnout to alignment, right? But when we are starting to do this work and figure out what is this for you, you can see how things will pull you out of burnout because you will start to feel better. So the next thing that I want to talk about is exactly that. In order to know what is your alignment, what are the things that are important to you, you are going to need to tune into your thoughts and feelings, which is something that we have covered many, many times on the show because it's so important. When you are struggling, we are often just in this space of so many negative thoughts, so many negative emotions. You may be drowning in resentment, frustration, overwhelm, anxiety, anger, rage. You just feel like you might not have any control over these emotions, like they are just something that you don't have any agency around. And that's not true. And it's not to say, this is another assumption, it is not to say that everything is going well in your world. It is not to say that there are not unjust, terrible, gaslighting, awful things. There are those things. And some of us are in very toxic work situations or difficulties at home. We're not discounting that. But let's assume that you're not in that particular situation. What are the thoughts that you were having over and over and over again that are increasing the time that you spend in that negative emotion, right? When you are having victim thoughts of, I have no choice, I have to do this, everybody is in control of my time and energy but me. That is an incredibly unempowered place. And we have to have some awareness of those thoughts going on to connect them to the emotions, to be able to see how we are a part of the burnout. Now, you know that we don't do gaslighting here. There is a serious problem in our healthcare system that has us overworking, that has us under-supported, under-resourced. Too many patients, too many sick patients, too much to do, and not enough help to do it. There is no debate about that. But if we are sitting here and we are adding to it by thinking that we have no choice, we have no agency, that the only thing that we can do is to see more and see more and see more, and we're beating ourselves up over and over and over again. We have to have some awareness of that role that we're playing as this is going on, because if we don't, we will not get out of burnout. We will jump from one place to one place or to thing, but we will not see the parts that we are contributing to ourselves. So again, there's no gaslighting going on here, but just to say that when you are stuck in burnout, when you're feeling like you're just steeped in these negative emotions, there is some part of your thoughts that have been conditioned to contribute to that. I really remember struggling with this. I could see how it was true. And, in the process of undoing it, it was a hard thing to do. It was a hard thing to look and see how my own thoughts were keeping me stuck in that situation. But as I was doing it, as I was seeing that, no, I did have choice and agency, and yes, I could practice different thoughts. And yeah, it really sucks to have this many negative thoughts, but there's something I can do about it. That really started to open the door for me. And that was really, really important as part of my journey. And I invite you to see that as necessary work, to see yourself as not broken if you are struggling with this, because this is an area that really needs some care and attention, especially once we get through the slog of med school and residency and fellowship and whatever that looks like, right? We need to be able to reorient and figure out what is it that we love? What is it that we are interested in? And how can I take back sort of my own brain space to be able to really tune into that and make some real change? So this is work that coaches do. This is work that sometimes you do with a therapist. You don't have to do this work alone, but you do need to do it in order to get unstuck. Now, I don't want to sit here either and say that you need to add something more to the already too many things that you have to do. Sometimes you are going to need to take a break. Sometimes people are going to leave a job or take leave if they are so burned out and so overwhelmed. So don't mishear me on this. But part of that healing, part of that moving through it is figuring out what are the thoughts and feelings that are contributing to this, and how can I start to work on that so that I can make things different. Someone in my family just started with dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT, which is originally a therapy modality that was tailored towards people with borderline personality disorder, but has much more widespread applicability. And it really focuses around emotional distress, emotional tolerance, or distress tolerance, rather, I guess is the word for it. And they sort of talk about two principles being true. One, the assumption that everyone is doing the best that they can. And two, that even if you're doing the best that you can, there is room for change. There is room for positive improvement. And I think that fits in nicely here. It is not your fault if you're struggling with burnout, working in a broken healthcare system, and your habits of perfectionism and people pleasing and never having boundaries have brought you to this place where you feel like you have no choice, no agency, and that you're completely stuck. It is not your fault. And it is also true that you are the only person who can tune into your thoughts and start to change them in order to feel better. So these two things can be true at the same time. And that leads us to the third thing that I want to talk about today, which is boundaries. Boundaries with yourself, boundaries with other people at home or at work. Boundaries are a tool that allow us to stay in alignment. You will be offered more things to do. And offered is a loose term. You will be asked to do more things than you are able to do, period. But also, you may be offered or asked to do things that you might be good at. You might do a perfectly reasonable job, but they are not in alignment with your gifts and talents. They are not in alignment with your passions and interests. You may have to say no to perfectly good opportunities that don't serve what you want. This is a real thing that I see quite frequently in large healthcare systems and academic medicine. Someone who is being sort of groomed to go up this leadership path or this academic path, they really don't want to do. They know they should want to do it. They know that it might be important to do it, but they actually don't really want that for themselves. They see how that looks in other people, and that's not what they actually want for themselves. As I was preparing for the podcast, I was thinking about a couple of years ago when I served as a board member on the King County Academy of Family Physicians board. Somebody asked me to do it. I had the time. I thought, sure, why not? This is a chance to learn something, kind of about the family physician community in my area. And, I would go to these meetings and I would participate. But, as I was sitting there, I just really realized, this is just not a good use of my time. This is not where my passions and interests are. And this is not, frankly, where my gifts and talents are. And it was very easy for me at the end of the 1-year term to say, you know what, this is fine, but I'm done. I'm good. I've contributed, and I'm going to step down from this. It is a good example of, we get asked to do something. We think, oh, sure, I guess I can do that. That sounds good. It'll be a good thing for my CV. It'll be good to network, whatever those things are, right? It's not a bad thing to do at all. And it just may not resonate or line up with what you actually want. Think about committees you get asked to join. Think about opportunities and promotions and things that you get asked to do that just really don't line up for you. You will have to say no to that in order to stay in alignment. And it's a really good place to practice boundaries. And people do need to practice boundaries. It is not something that comes automatically to most of us, especially if you've been living a long time without boundaries. So I want us to see boundaries as a tool that help us to stay in alignment. When you think about what goes on at home, things that you have to say no to, things that you have to, kind of step up and do in order to do something that serves you. Now, we wrestle with this. We think, oh, that's really selfish, right? If I don't know, I choose to exercise instead of, I don't know, doing something with my kid. But if I really need to take good care of my health, I'm going to need to set some boundaries. That means I'm going to need to say no to some things, at some times, even though they might be a perfectly good idea. I don't necessarily not want to spend time with my kid. But on the other hand, if it's really important that I get that exercise in because it matters to me, because it matters to me sort of keeping in alignment with my health goals, then, I may need to make that compromise. I'm not wrong one way or the other, but I have to decide what is the most important thing. And knowing that my time is limited and finite, how am I going to make the decision to be able to match these things up? This is an imperfect world, and we will sometimes have to make choices. Now, does that mean I'm advocating for never hanging out with your kid and always doing something for yourself? No, but I just want to show us that we sometimes need to be able to say, no, I can't do that right now because I need to do this other thing. And I just want to recognize that there is some emotion there, there's some thought there, but boundaries are really a tool that help us to stay in alignment. If the consequence that I always do, whether at home or at work, I always do what people ask me to do, over what it is that I want to do, then, the reality is that I'm never going to make time for myself. That's it. People ask me all the time, how can I find the time? How can I, get this thing done? You're going to need to make the time. And unfortunately, no one's going to hand it to you. So that is, kind of a big piece of thinking to do for yourself. Again, I'm going to repeat that, this idea of alignment is a state of living and making decisions in a way that consistently honors your core values, leverages your unique gifts, and energizes you through your passions and interests. We've talked about alignment as an antidote to burnout, although it's a big picture item and not an immediate thing. We've talked about having to tune into our thoughts and emotions so that we can really understand how they are contributing to feeling aligned or not aligned. We've talked about boundaries as a necessary tool in order to be able to stay in alignment, as imperfect as things are. My friends, I hope that is helpful. I certainly hope that the volume recorded this time. Oh, this is the world that we live in. Until next time, until next week, take care, my friends.
Well, that's our show for today. Thank you as always for listening. To learn more about my coaching programs, head to www.healthierforgood.com. And if you love this podcast, please drop us a review on iTunes or support the show by clicking the link in the show notes. Until next time, take care.